Hi, I'm Pam Crone. I work for the California Marine Sanctuary Foundation. We're working on a Healthy Soils project right here at Triple M Ranch with Javier Zamora and with Laura Murphy, who I'll introduce in a minute. This project is doing work that's actually helping the ocean ecosystems. What's happening here is that we're doing practices that are helping carbon to be pulled out of the air and into the ground and into the soil, where they benefit the microbial growth of the soil and the plant growth on top of the soil, and at the same time the marine sanctuary, because then there's less carbon dioxide in the air. The marine sanctuaries experienced about a 1 degree temperature increase since the Industrial Revolution, and it's causing a lot of things to happen in the ocean. If enough ranchers and farmers can practice soil health practices on their ranch, we can start to diminish the rate of warming of the ocean, and also we can start to reverse some of these consequences that we're seeing.
Good morning, Javier. Thanks for taking the time to talk about soil health principles with us today in your farming system here at Triple M. One of the first principles of soil health, according to the NRCS, that I'd like to discuss with you is keeping a living root in the ground. Can you talk about how in your farming system you keep a living root in the ground as much time as possible? And maybe touch on how much time would a field in your ranch typically go without a living root in the ground?
During our season, I try to plant things as time goes by, right after another. And when the winter time comes, to make sure that I cover it with some sort of cover crop, depending on what type of soil I have, prior to the heavy rains coming.
So when you use a cover crop, that's typically in the winter part of the cycle and to prevent erosion. Now I understand you have a pretty diverse terrain in your ranch and in other ranches, different types of soil. How are you deciding about what kind of cover crop to apply on this different type of ground?
If it's heavy soil, I normally try to give it a little more air, so planting a little more grass or maybe some sort of legume that has a deeper root that will help me achieve that. And if it's a very sandy soil, I normally do something that is going to provide some more nitrogen to my soil, meaning I could probably do like a bunch of different cowpeas, fava beans, veg, all those legumes that will provide a source of nitrogen for you during the season. But to answer your question is, I don't just do it myself. I have professional people like yourself and people as part of the USDA and NRCS.
And between those 2 to 3 crops, how long would you say is typical for a field to be left without a living root in the soil?
0. Because if I plant really early on, let's say we start last year and we planted cover crop in November, and then we'll till it in February, and towards the very beginning of March, we are planting some broccoli. So obviously by June you'll remove that, and then you can do, if you remove the broccoli, so it's gonna take me about 4 days to do that. And then you will actually still have the roots within your soil. They're just decomposing. So you can do some lettuce, like romaine, right away, within a week. You can do it. I think you've probably seen it. So you can do romaine lettuce, and romaine lettuce needs just a tiny little bit of soil. This season we did that. We did broccoli, we did romaine, and I'm thinking of doing cilantro at the very end. So there's your 3.
Okay. And after that, a winter cover crop.
That is correct. So that would be the 4th.
It's common in our systems to see broccoli used almost as a winter cover crop, or even very intentionally as a cover crop. Even if it can be a marketable crop, it's still adding organic matter, keeping a living root in the soil, and addressing some of the other soil health principles. The principle of keeping the soil covered. Can you talk about how in this field and in this Healthy Soils project, you are acting to keep the soil covered as much as possible?
So you kind of have to understand how vegetables or how plants behave and what the needs are. In this case, I can tell you that if I had broccoli really early on, or if I had cover crop, of course the density of planting will take care of covering the entire area of the soil. Then if you're gonna come in next with broccoli or some sort of leafy green, if it's broccoli or collard greens or kale or some other leafy green, will eventually or really soon will cover the entire plot of land covering the furrows. The third item or third crop that you can plant will be something like this, a winter squash that will cover the entire soil area, so it's going to be covered, and by then you can go back to cover crop. So you can see things here that you have corn, you have squash, just a lot of diversity. You have straw flowers, you have pumpkins, you have marigolds, you have zinnias, you have more flowers.
And so now we're getting into a third of the soil health principles, which is to increase biodiversity. And so you've already mentioned one crop after another, and I can see from here that even in those crops there are different varieties. And aside from that, there are some weeds, and I can hear some wildlife.
Oh,
so can you touch on how biodiversity factors in to your soil health practices?
And if you stay quiet and listen to what's going on around, the number one thing you'll hear is just a lot of birds, different types of birds. Having birds around the farm, there are a lot of benefits to it. They help you minimize the chemical input that you'll have to use, because they help you deal with some pests that are really hard to get rid of. Lots of little worms they eat. So, diversity, it's how my business has probably succeeded and has given me insurance, not only financial insurance, but also soil health insurance. I'll give you an example. When I plant my strawberries, right after strawberries, I normally do broccoli, because broccoli is going to help me deal with some of the colonization of fungi that is bad for the next strawberries or the next crop, the verticillium wilt. So broccoli serves as a natural fumigant. Not only do I plant broccoli for that, which is the main purpose after strawberries, but I also plant broccoli or some sort of brassica because it's going to be winter time, and there's a lots of nitrogen left behind in the soil right after I remove my strawberries. So if I plant broccoli or leeks, I have to do very, very little nutrition during the winter time for them, because the nitrogen needed to grow the broccoli is already there. And then it's winter time, and that's what grows really well. That right after the broccoli, you can plant something else. But if you're not planting broccoli right after strawberries, you can cover crop right away. And your cover crop will grow beautifully because, again, there's nitrogen and a lot of nutrients left behind from the strawberry crop that was there for months and will benefit the cover crop to start the growth. And then eventually the cover crop will give you more nutrients back to the soil if you let it grow big, right?
So Javier, you were discussing about in your production system moving from one crop to another relatively quickly. That doesn't leave a lot of time for decomposition of the plant residues, and somehow that residue has to be incorporated to feed into these nutrient cycles that you were addressing. One of the soil health principles that we often find difficult to address in vegetable production systems for those reasons is minimizing disturbance of the soil. So can you touch on how you address this soil health principle? How do you minimize the physical disturbance of the soil and also the chemical disturbance?
It goes back to planning, crop type, the needs of the plant, meaning how deep does its root system goes, how much space they need to fully develop. I'll start with the big one. Strawberries, because strawberries the root can grow actually really big, as much as this. It needs a really, really soft area. That's why strawberry growers rip the soil really deep. In my case, if I plant strawberries, I plant strawberries at a certain section every 3 years. So maybe every 3 years I'm gonna have to rip that piece of soil deeply, and I will do some disturbance that I wish I didn't have to. But the following 2.5 years, I can do things like, let's say we did faba beans. Faba beans grow big, give you a crop, you sell it, and then you incorporate that right away. You get some nutrients, you get lots of nitrogen, get some really healthy roots, and then you can disc that lightly and plant lettuce right away within a few days. So right after lettuce, you can do some cilantro. How much is the cilantro gonna grow? I mean, cilantro is just a 55, 60-day crop that will just go this deep. So you can do cilantro to minimum disturbance. And then right after that, you can just come in and do some veg for winter time or some sort of grass. So that's minimum disturbance right there. When you do strawberries, and right after strawberries, when you do broccoli, that's a little more difficult because broccoli is gonna grow bigger, then it's a bigger zone for the roots to grow. And remember, you already had planted strawberries, so you have already a soft piece of land that will help you, or will help broccoli develop really well, and you have the nutrients that will benefit you. But when broccoli is done and you're gonna incorporate that takes a little more work because the broccoli stalk is really thick and it will not decompose in the 5, 6, 7 days that I told you earlier. So it's probably gonna take the normal 2 weeks. And then you're gonna have to use some more different equipment. It would also depend what you use and what pieces of equipment you have available. If you have, every piece of equipment that will help you chop it down to a minimum piece, and then you're actually gonna be able to go in right away within 10 days and plant something else.
So one more time, we'll just quickly review what those soil health principles were. Keeping a living root, keeping the soil covered, maintaining biodiversity, and minimizing disturbance, both physical and chemical, in your production systems in order to build healthy soil, to have productive crops, and a good market and success as a farmer.
Those 4 principles, done the right way and the best you can, with the help of others, equals success.